3, 2, 1.
Hello, welcome to Justice on Our Minds. Tonight's show is all about this Georgia runoff race you keep hearing about. Georgia not only just flipped blue for Biden, but now Georgia has another incredible opportunity to flip the United States Senate on Tuesday, January 5th. Early voting is underway, so we'll be talking about that tonight as well. Thank you for joining us tonight to discuss yet another one of the most important elections of our time. I'm Misty Rebick, and I'll be moderating our discussion tonight, hosted by Senator Bernie Sanders and with special guest, newly elected Congresswoman-elect Williams. That's the senator clapping in the background. So you're going to be hearing also from people on the ground in Georgia tonight who are working to turn out the vote and have been, working with all sorts of people from different walks of life. So stay tuned, because we're going to talk about why this race matters so much to the future. And if you've been paying attention the last few weeks, you also know that there's been a huge fight happening in Washington, D.C. and in the Congress around COVID relief. Senator Bernie Sanders has been in D.C. working hard to make sure that the next COVID relief bill gets direct cash payments to working families, to people like you and me, and also to continue to have that extended unemployment benefit. So, this fight really couldn't be more timely when it comes to what's at stake in Georgia. We need to flip the Senate. The pandemic is still far from over, and we're going to need leaders like Reverend Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff to help us pass important legislation to help working people survive and get on their feet during this economic crisis. So we're going to be talking about that tonight. And let's take a brief look at a video about the state of the race.
Voting kicked off today in Georgia. The state's critical pair of runoff elections will determine which party controls the chamber.
The Georgia Secretary of State's office said last week that so far, nearly 1.2 million voters had requested absentee ballots for the runoff races.
We have had a 60% increase in COVID infections over the past week in Georgia. We're seeing a 60% increase in COVID infections over the past week in Georgia. We're seeing that surge, and these real issues are affecting Georgia voters, and so they're turning out to vote.
We've had 1 in 4 businesses, small businesses that were open last year that have shut down. We have 160,000 people facing evictions. We have 4.1 million job loss claims.
And Perdue, by the way, is holding up relief for his own constituents. He opposed even the first round of stimulus checks for people, and he's blocking another round right now.
It must be difficult to explain why you want to get rid of health care in the middle of a pandemic.
Instead of standing up to Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump and demanding that we get COVID relief before Christmas, they are running around the state pushing lies and trying to defend the indefensible.
The people have to rise up in this defining moment in American history and reclaim our democracy.
We've lost more than 300,000 Americans to this virus. A virus our Senator David Perdue told us was no deadlier than the common flu, while he was buying up shares in manufacturers of vaccines and medical equipment.
As we have learned tragically this year, elections are a matter of life and death. And so vote.
That's right. That's what we're talking about tonight. This Georgia race, this runoff race we've been hearing about for the last month. We have special guest Congresswoman-elect Williams joining us along with Senator Bernie Sanders. We're calling this Justice on Our Minds because it's all about Georgia tonight. We have folks joining us from Roswell, Georgia, Atlanta, Evans, all sorts of folks joining us from across the state of Georgia. And to those of you who are joining us across the country, think about how you're going to volunteer and show up to help turn out the vote for this important race in front of us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the host of our evening, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Misty, thank you very much for helping to organize the event. And let me thank all of our panelists and all of you who are watching tonight. I know that the people of Georgia are tired of elections. We went through the presidential election. And by the way, let me say this to the people of Georgia. There are 50 states in our country, and Georgia pulled off the biggest upset of any of those 50 states. Congratulations, Georgia. You had a huge voter turnout. You had young people coming out like never before, and Joe Biden won that state to everybody's surprise. So thank you very much, Georgia, for what you did. That's part one. And now we got to take part two. And what I want to point out tonight is not just that in Georgia you have 2 excellent candidates for Senate, Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff, who under any circumstance at any time would be really great candidates to support. But as Misty indicated, this election is more than just electing two good United States senators and replacing two United States senators who, in my view, could care less for the needs of working families. It turns out that right now there are 48 Democrats in the Senate, 52 Republicans. If we can win the 2 seats in Georgia, that would mean 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans, and our new Vice President, Kamala Harris, would vote with the Democrats, giving us control over the United States Senate. Now, I think many people don't know really what that means. So control of the Senate, big deal. What does it mean? It is a huge deal. And let me tell you briefly why. The leader of the Senate, who represents the majority party, that's currently Mitch McConnell from Kentucky, the leader of the Senate determines what bills get onto the floor of the U.S. Senate. So right now we have a situation where the House of Representatives, controlled by Democrats, have done a pretty good job in passing significant pieces of legislation. They have voted to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. They voted for massive election reform and doing away with voter suppression. They are moving to do away with billionaires buying elections through Citizens United. They're moving aggressively to make college more affordable, to move toward universal child care, to move in a very aggressive way for criminal justice reform, for immigration reform, to create millions of jobs rebuilding our infrastructure, to create millions more jobs transforming our energy system from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. That is a very serious agenda that working families in this country need. We need to raise wages. We need to create new jobs. We need to expand healthcare. And the House has done a pretty good job in all of those areas. But guess what? Because Republicans control the Senate, none of that legislation came from the House to the Senate. Mitch McConnell said, we don't want to talk about raising the minimum wage. We don't want to talk about serious COVID emergency relief legislation. We don't want to talk about climate change. We don't want to talk about anything except pushing forward the nomination of right-wing judges. So we have an incredible do-nothing U.S. Senate right now. This country faces more crises than at any time in 100 years. Pandemic raging, 90 million people without any health insurance, half of our people living paycheck to paycheck, a major housing crisis. You name it, we got it. But no serious legislation is being brought to the Senate, is being debated in the Senate because of Republican control. So, to my friends in Georgia, that is what this election is about. It's about electing two strong progressive senators in Reverend Warnock and in John Ossoff. People are going to fight for you. But it is also about which party controls the United States Senate. And that is a very, very big deal. So once again, I want to congratulate the people in Georgia for the tremendous work that they have done in giving their electoral votes to Joe Biden. And now let's go forward and elect these two great new members of the United States Senate. And when we talk about new members of Congress, it is my extraordinary pleasure to introduce the Congresswoman-elect from Georgia, and that is Nikema Williams. And I've had the opportunity to get to know Nikema Nekima in the last few months. And I think, my friends, you are in for a big surprise. You're going to have one of the most progressive and best fighters for working families in the United States Congress. I want to congratulate again the people in Georgia for electing Nekima Williams. Nekima, you want to say a few words?
Yes. Thank you so much, Senator Sanders. I am Nekima Williams, y'all, and I'm the chairwoman of the Democratic Party of Georgia. And as Senator Sanders said, I am the Congresswoman-elect for Georgia's 5th Congressional District, continuing the legacy of my friend, mentor, and Congressman, John Lewis. Senator Sanders, thank you again for endorsing my campaign and standing with me as I fight out loud and on purpose for working families in this country. I'm looking forward to working with you in Washington as we deliver on the promise of America for everyone, no matter their zip code, no matter their bank account. Congressman Lewis's lifelong commitment to progressive values is an inspiration for all of us, and I promise to continue to draw upon that in Congress as I uplift those most marginalized in our communities. That's how I make my decisions. But before I get to Congress, y'all, we've got work to do right here in Georgia, battleground Georgia. On January 5th, we have an opportunity to elect not one, but 2 United States senators right here in Georgia. My friends, Reverend Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff, are 2 progressive leaders in Georgia that I know Congressman Lewis would be proud of. Reverend Warnock is the pastor at Martin Luther King's church, American's Freedom Church, Ebenezer Baptist Church, and he was Congressman Lewis's pastor for many years. And y'all, Jon Ossoff cut his political teeth working for Congressman Lewis. The values that Jon Ossoff and Reverend Warnock hold dear are also the issues that everyone here cares about: criminal justice reform, student debt relief, and access to healthcare as a basic human right. And this election, y'all, isn't just about electing 2 senators. As Senator Sanders told us, if we dig deep one more time, we can secure a progressive Senate majority for Democrats. And we've seen how much damage Trump Republicans and extremists can do with 4 years of unchecked power. We've seen how Mitch McConnell can ruin a Democratic presidential administration. So it's no exaggeration to say that everything is on the line in Georgia. Mitch McConnell, I would call him leader, but he hasn't shown much leadership. Him and Trump and Georgia's 2 Republican senators have to pay for their complicity and inaction and for the damage that they've caused. Y'all, I have a little son who's 5 years old who started kindergarten, his first interaction with school. My little Carter Cakes was in front of a computer screen because we had leaders in the United States Senate, Republican leaders, who didn't think enough to do something to get this pandemic under control. Warnock and Ossoff's opponents have spent the pandemic lining their own pockets and lying to everyday Georgians about the dangers of COVID, but we all know how true and how real the dangers are. I suffered at the hands of COVID-19, so I understand the need to make sure that we get our economy back on track, to make sure that we get people the care that they need and deserve. But y'all, our 2 US senators, they continue to live in a fantasy land. They've refused to acknowledge that Joe Biden and my soror Kamala Harris won the election, and they've been blatantly racist on the campaign trail, even going so far as to cozying up to leaders of the KKK. But we can't do this alone. We can't get rid of them alone. This is about all of us coming together. This is a turnout election, and we know that the results will be just as razor thin as the results were in November. So I'm asking you, when you think you can't make one more phone call, when your friends are sick of you texting them, we need your help, y'all. We need you one more time to help us keep organizing across the state, talking to voters everywhere, and making sure that we turn back out to vote for Reverend Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff. January 5th is the last day to vote. Let's not call it election day because early voting is underway. And when we elect them to the Senate, you can rest assured that I won't let them forget who got them there. So let's get to work, y'all, and elect us some senators that care about all of Georgia and not just themselves.
Well, Nekima, thank you very much. And thank you not only for the fact that you're going to be a wonderful member of Congress, but thank you for your work with the Georgia Democratic Party. The upset that you guys pulled off did not take place by accident, right?
That's right.
It took place the old-fashioned way. by a lot of grassroots organizing. And I know that you and Stacy and others worked your tails off to make that happen. And thank you from Vermont and all over this country. Thank you for what you did.
Thank you.
It is my pleasure right now. We talk about grassroots activism. We talk about the trade union movement. And it's my pleasure now to introduce Val Barnhart, who is the Political and Communications Director with the United Food and Commercial Workers Local Union 1996. And Val is joining us from Atlanta. Val?
Hi, thank you, Senator Sanders and my Congresswoman-elect Williams for inviting me to be here. And thank you for appreciating the importance of workers in our state and in our country. I've been active in politics since 2010 because it's the way we get the right people in office to fight for justice. Whether it's raising wages or holding corporations accountable, or just in general, fighting for policies that are going to keep us from continuing to have a once-in-a-lifetime economic crisis every 10 years that sets workers back, particularly younger workers, more every time. And as a millennial, I'm going through my second one and I don't want any more. However, this particular election is important to me for two reasons, outside of the stakes being very high, as we've talked about. The first reason is that a few days ago, it was actually the 5-year anniversary of my mother's passing. She died suddenly at 52 because this country doesn't treat access to basic medical care as a right, but as a privilege only for those with a certain kind of job or a certain amount of wealth, and that needs to change. And the second one is we have to defeat this pandemic, y'all. It didn't have to be this way, right? We need to fix the things that made this pandemic so bad to begin with. I saw folks in a lot of different places in the chat, whether you're in Metro Atlanta or rural Georgia, where I'm from, or South Georgia, any part of the state, folks will tell you that the problems we are facing now, COVID didn't create them, right? These problems existed before the pandemic. This virus, it attacked and amplified the weakest parts of our society and government. And we all know there's no COVID recovery without true racial justice or without fixing wealth inequality. And as my Congresswoman-elect Williams understands as a former UFCW member, there's no bouncing back from this without a $15 an hour minimum wage, but also things like true appreciation for our essential workers in this pandemic by giving them hazard pay for the hazardous work that they performed. And thank you, Senator Sanders, for your help in this effort to restore hazard pay to our members. And we also need direct payments to people now. Congress needs to act, which I know y'all are working on. But workers have seen increased and unexpected costs related to the pandemic around childcare, education, transportation, and just the cost of basic essentials. And this is the case for all working families. And in many cases, that's coupled with job loss. So all of these things are on the line on January 5th, and our new senators do have a chance to set a new course for our state, but for the country. And in Georgia, y'all, our votes matter so much right now because we have the opportunity to truly fight for these things we want to see with one election, the most important one. And also, like, y'all know I couldn't come tonight without an action. So I think, Misty, we do have the link for folks to take action to help restore hazard pay for grocery workers.
Misty?
Yes, we do. So we'll be dropping that in the chat. I'm sorry, I didn't realize y'all were waiting for me. Drop it in the chat, also on the screen. Make sure you sign to help, make sure that we get hazard pay for workers. So back to you, Senator.
Okay. Val, thank you very much for the work you're doing and for what you said, because I think you're exactly right. This pandemic is not the cause of all of our economic crises, but it really has shown the whole country about the level of inequality and injustice which exists. The people who are dying at the highest rates are people who are out there doing basic work, critical work, exposing themselves to the virus, and often they are brown and black workers, people working for inadequate wages. So if we are going to move this country forward, and Nakima, I know, understands this. We must deal with the growing level of income and wealth inequality. We've got to deal, as Reverend Barber reminds us all the time, with the incredible amount of poverty that exists in this country, with the number of people who are uninsured and underinsured. And as Val said, we are the only, or let me paraphrase what she said, we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee healthcare to all people as a human right. I live 50 miles away from Canada. Everybody has healthcare. You don't take out your wallet. You don't take out your credit card. You go to any doctor or hospital you want. They spend half as much as we do per healthcare. So we got a lot of work on our hands, and we need those two new senators from Georgia to help us move forward. And one of the exciting things that's happened in this election in 2020 is we have seen the highest voter turnout of young people that we have ever seen. And that's especially true in Georgia, where young people came out all over the place in record-breaking numbers. And one of those young people was Sydney Spessard, who was a high school senior in Marietta, Georgia. And she was a proud first-time voter in the November general election and looks forward to casting another ballot in the runoff election. Sydney, congratulations very much for your participation in American democracy.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so honored to be here amongst these incredible people tonight. The 2016 presidential election was the first time I was in tune to what's happening in the political world. I was in 8th grade at the time, so the 4 years since have lined up directly with my 4 years in high school. As I've grown to be more politically active and aware of current events, I've also grown academically. I've taken classes such as AP US Government and Environmental Science and acquired experience as a student leader. With education and growth, I've also gained new knowledge that has both questioned and reaffirmed my beliefs, allowing me to evolve as a person. And what's really interesting to me is that with people my age, our entire life is about learning. But once we graduate high school or college, somehow it's okay that that learning stops. I say all this to stress the importance of breaking away from that pattern and continuing to make an effort to educate ourselves. Embrace what we don't understand and take steps to understand it. I'm learning things tonight from everyone here. And to me, that's one of the most important aspects of being a politically engaged participant of this country. And to the young people listening, it's crucial that you realize the importance of your vote. You are not only voting for yourself in this one moment, you're voting on behalf of all of the people in the past who fought for our right to vote. And you are voting for all of the people who will come after us in the future. And you're voting for all of the people today who cannot. There's too much value in that to throw it away. We need to acknowledge this power we have to make our voices heard. As an 18-year-old, I'm often told how wonderful my generation is, that we're the future of this country and that we're the ones to do the good. But that's an enormous amount of pressure, and it's also a way to deflect the problems of today and push them off for tomorrow. We need people in office who will represent us today, who will make decisions on our behalf today, who want to hear us and wish to amplify our voices, and who recognize that tomorrow's problems can actually be handled and solved today. Georgia voters have the opportunity to vote for Jon Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock, two candidates who are also tired of watching people in power make decisions that benefit them in the moment, ignoring the damage and harm that will follow and be inflicted upon others. Stay engaged, keep learning, continue to listen, hold our officials accountable, and most importantly, don't take your vote for granted. Thank you.
Sydney, thank you very much. YT Bell is a community leader and former councilwoman for the city of Clarkston, Georgia. YT is a trained social worker and a longtime organizer. YT, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Senator Sanders, for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Taranika YT Bell, and I'm a former city councilwoman in the city of Clarkston, where I served from 2017 to 2020. Clarkston is a small city just outside of Atlanta, and it's renowned for its diversity. often being referred to as the most diverse square mile in the country. My journey as a community advocate and a public servant began long before my time in elected office. I recall my first advocacy experience as a small child in Washington County, Georgia, working to make sure that we secured more recess time for myself and my classmates. It was then at a very young age that I realized the power of my voice and the significance in speaking up for others who are often not heard or whose voices weren't valued. Georgia on My Mind is not only our state song, but it has been a theme that has motivated me to make the upcoming U.S. Senate election meaningful. To me, Georgia on My Mind embodies the selflessness exhibited by candidates Ossoff and Warnock, as I truly believe that they're the two candidates to help turn our great state and nation around. This race is extremely important to me because as a local elected, I saw and heard firsthand the hopelessness from my constituents, my neighbors, the plight that no one living in America should have to endure. People share with me how they lost their jobs, how they feared for their lives, and how they were and still are unable to meet their basic needs, such as providing shelter and food to their families. But we know we have a long way to recover from this pandemic and economic disaster that we're facing. My constituents need continued relief, direct payments to working families, extended unemployment, and a continuation of moratoriums on rent. Once the vaccination is out, we still will be dealing with the pandemic. So while Amazon and Uber are making billions in profit, working essential workers and domestic workers are still out of jobs. As city leaders, we're doing as much as we can on the local level to limit gatherings, to no more than 10 people, to reduce the spread of COVID-19, but we need federal funding. Moratoriums on evictions are ending, and without federal support, our residents will be removed from their homes. I'm invested in this race because I wholeheartedly believe that the same momentum that got us here will help us prevail in January for Georgia and for the country, because our public health, fair wages, benefits for our essential workers, thriving small businesses, education, and the future of our nation is at stake. The nation is dependent on Georgia to get things done. And that's the only Georgia I know, and I'm confident that we will. Thank you.
Thank you very much, White T, for all you do and for your remarks. And you're right, this whole country, in fact, the world, is looking at the state of Georgia, and I'm confident that you guys are going to do the right thing. Chase Stell is a Georgia native and Atlanta resident, where he serves as the president of the Young Democrats of Atlanta. Chase works at the Nonprofit Center for Transportation and the Environment. Chase, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Senator. I started 2020 knocking on doors in Des Moines for our campaign, and I never would have in a million years expected to end 2020 on a meeting with you. It's an honor, and thank you, Congresswoman Williams, for having me. So I've always been interested in politics and public policy, but I first got involved during the 2014 midterms elections when I knocked on doors in Athens, Georgia for Jason Carter and Michelle Nunn. My passion for advocating for common sense change was further ignited while campaigning for Bernie Sanders in 2016 and Stacey Abrams in 2018. After serving as the service director this past year, I was recently elected president of the Young Democrats of Atlanta. In addition to immediate economic relief, voting for John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock means two specific issues will get the attention they so deserve: climate change and racial justice. Two issues that have been on the top of mind for me and countless other Georgians throughout 2020. During the day, I work at the Center for Transportation and the Environment, or CTE, which is a national nonprofit with a mission to deploy zero-emission vehicles. Transportation is the largest greenhouse gas producing economic sector in the US, with over a quarter of these vehicles emissions coming from medium and heavy duty vehicles. This is where we focus our biggest efforts at CTE and where we think federal and state governments can have the biggest influence on climate change. Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff take this threat seriously, and will fight for our future. They know that we have no choice but to invest in clean and sustainable infrastructure. The second issue is racial justice. John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock believe that Black lives matter. My life partner is a Black woman. Her brother is a Black man who is statistically more likely to be killed than his white counterpart. These two candidates understand the importance and need to fight the systemic racism of our country. They understand that updating voting rights legislation is crucial. Another key issue is marijuana decriminalization, followed by legalization. The American economy does not benefit when nonviolent pot smokers are locked up. Addressing these issues are the complete opposite of radical. In fact, they're common sense. And John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock know that. And so do the majority of Georgians and the majority of Americans, but we all have to vote. If there are folks in the Atlanta area wanting to help push John Ossoff, Reverend Warnock, and Daniel Blackman over the edge, the Young Democrats of Atlanta will be hosting a socially distant drive-in event at Dad's Garage on December 30th. And you can visit the YDATL Facebook page for more information. And the last thing I'd like to say is to all the young people listening, if you're passionate about an issue, please get involved. If it's a racial justice you're most passionate about, join the NAACP. If it's international relations, join the World Affairs Council of Atlanta. If it's politics, join the Young Dems. Whatever your issue, there are people that feel the same as you. We all have the power to change the world as long as you show up. Thank you, Senator, Congresswoman, and my fellow panelists. You guys are all an inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chase. Claire Gums is New Georgia Project's economic justice organizer and is joining us from Lithonia, Georgia. Claire?
Thank you so much for inviting the New Georgia Project to be a part of this important conversation this evening. We're so grateful for this opportunity from Senator Sanders and Congresswoman-elect Williams to share our work and opportunities for action over the next 3 weeks. I personally got involved with NGP because I wanted to serve and advocate for my community, not only Georgians, but people that look like me. NGP works to register the new Georgia majority, and it has given me the platform to engage Georgia voters through my economic justice campaign. The Georgia runoff election is important to me because it will decide the direction of our country and U.S. Senate and what we can get done for our communities. The Senate is key to expanding healthcare, raising wages for working people, securing and expanding voting rights for our communities, and ensuring that we support small businesses and working people recover from the COVID economic crisis. Early voting is already underway in Georgia with 700,000 ballots cast as of yesterday. If you haven't cast your ballot yet, please do so, and then get your friends and family to do the same. The New Georgia Project has been organizing since 2014 and to make sure our community's voices are heard and our votes are counted. We've registered almost 500,000 Georgia voters since our founding. And for the general election alone on November 3rd, our work included over 1 million text messages, over 2 million phone calls, 100,000 conversations with voters, and we have over 4,000 active NGP volunteers. And we did it while living through and surviving a global pandemic that has disproportionately impacted our community. After the general election, our team got together, staff volunteers, we quickly shifted gears to make sure that every Georgian had the information they needed to cast their ballot in the runoff. Here in Georgia, we know voter suppression when we see it, right? We're here to meet people where they're at, engage them in long-term conversation about civic engagement, no matter our zip code, our age, our color, our skin. Every voter should have a say in our democracy and access to the ballot box. We are doing so much in the next 3 weeks, and we would love to have you join us, whether you are here in Georgia, coming to Georgia, or you're at home anywhere else in the country. We have opportunities for making calls, canvassing, creating artwork for our offices, and being a volunteer poll monitor, protecting the vote. I know that we're sharing how to sign up for these activities after this event, so I encourage you to sign up and hope to see you on the campaign trail virtually or in real life. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Claire, and congratulations to the New Georgia Project. I just want you to know that the work that you are doing is a model for the entire country. Because the future of progressive politics is not just 30-second TV ads. It's doing the grassroots organizing that you are doing. It's getting young people involved. It's talking to people about the issues that impact their lives. And that's what you're doing. So there's nothing more important than that. Congratulations for all that you're doing. Okay, Misty, I think, do we have any questions?
Yes, we've had some questions come in. I'm actually going to start with one that came in from Twitter. I think it's really relevant to kind of the conversation here. This comes from someone called TG's mom from Twitter. TG asks, how about raising Social Security a few hundred? I get 583 after 146 for Medicare is pulled out. I'm not the only senior who's living on barely anything. The way utilities, food, and everyday expenses are rising, I'll be living in my car before long.
Well, let me start the answer off. I'll give it over to the Congresswoman-elect, and others can chime in. Look, the priorities that the United States government has established are, in my view, very, very backward. We give massive tax breaks to billionaires. We spend more on the military than the next 10 countries combined. We give hundreds of billions of dollars away in corporate welfare to large profitable corporations. And yet when it comes to the needs of the most vulnerable people in our country, the children or the elderly, we really are not doing anywhere near what we should be doing. Now, a few hours ago, I was doing a town meeting in my own state of Vermont with seniors, and that same question came up about the fact that it is very hard for many seniors to live on the inadequate Social Security benefits that they are receiving. So let me just say this to CD, and that is Joe Biden has campaigned on the need to expand Social Security benefits. He understands, as I do, that people can't make it on what they have right now, that the COLAs, cost of living adjustments, that people receive are too low, that people cannot afford the high cost of prescription drugs or the out-of-pocket expenses they have to pay through Medicare. So this election becomes important because I know that Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff will support us in improving benefits for Social Security recipients. That is a major priority for me, for President-elect Biden. And let me give it over to your next Congresswoman, Nakima Williams.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. I could not have made it more clear that our priorities are out of whack in this country. We have to center those most marginalized, and that includes our seniors. Every day I get emails from people here in the state. I'm currently serving in the state legislature, and I get the emails from people not knowing, especially during this pandemic, how they're going to make ends meet in this country, how they're going to pay for their prescription drugs. And the lines that we're seeing at churches and at food giveaways should not be happening in the richest country in the world. We have people lined up to get food right now during a global pandemic. But what I can tell you is that help is on the way. There are so many things that have been proposed by the Biden administration that Senator Sanders has talked about that has already passed the House that we simply cannot get through with the current leadership that we have in the United States Senate. So that's why I'm working every day between now and January 5th to make sure that we elect John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock to the United States Senate, because Senator Sanders needs some help, y'all. He needs a majority in the Senate. He needs Kamala Harris to be the tiebreaker so that we can really fight for the people of this country that need us so desperately.
Well said. I need help, help, help. Georgia, you can do it. Okay. Anybody else want to comment on that, or should we go to the next question?
Senator Sanders, I'd like to make a comment, if I may.
Sure.
Social Security is very important, but I think one thing we need to remember is that a pension is a very important part of the retirement equation. for so many people. I think the worst thing about pensions is that they aren't as available and prevalent as they used to be. And we need to make sure that Congress takes action to protect, but expand pensions for all working people to make sure that everyone's retirement is secure.
Val, that is a very, very good point. And the truth is that half of older workers in America have virtually nothing in the bank. So imagine being 55 or 60 with no savings, worried about how you're going to make it when you leave your work. Good point. Any other comments from the panel? Okay, Misty, let's go to the next question.
All right, this question comes from Allison Ross from Atlanta, directing Allison's question to you, Senator. Do you think the public option that Biden is proposing would cover everyone who needs it? If not, how can we continue to work to get Biden to sign on to Medicare for all?
The public option is a step forward, expanding access to health care, as Biden wants to do, is enormously important because so many of our people are uninsured or underinsured. But I have to say, to my mind, at the end of the day, what has to happen, and I believe will happen, is that this country will move to a Medicare for all single-payer system. There is something fundamentally wrong when we spend almost twice as much per person on healthcare as any other country, and yet over 90 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured. And in some cases, we spend 10 times more for exactly the same prescription drugs as the people in other countries. The function of healthcare should be to provide quality care to all, not to make billions in profits for the insurance companies and the drug companies. So I think you'll see under President-elect Biden's plans a significant expansion. The other thing that he wants to do is to lower the eligibility age for Medicare from 65 down to 60, which is a start. So he's starting off in the right direction. But I think at the end of the day, in my view, and I speak only for myself, we're going to have to move to the Medicare for all single payer program. Nakima, do you want to jump in on that one?
Well, you know, I'm with you on that one, Senator Sanders. I know what it's like to need care and not be able to get the care that you need. I'll never forget in 2017, which was not that long ago, just 3 short years ago, I had a car accident right here in Atlanta, and the ambulance showed up. My car was total, and I knew that my car was going to be towed off and be taken care of, airbags deployed, and I had visible burns and seatbelt bruises, but I had the ambulance to drive away because I didn't have health insurance and I didn't know how I would pay the bill. And we should not live like that in this country. And so I know a lot of people are talking about Medicare for all, and I 100% support Medicare for all because I believe that healthcare should be a basic human right, especially in this country. When we look at what people are going through in this country just to get the care that they need, especially in the midst of a global pandemic, we have people losing their healthcare in the middle of a pandemic. So how are people supposed to get the care that they need? We're talking about a vaccine, but how is it going to be paid for? How are people going to get the vaccine who need it, who are on the front lines every day, who are suffering disproportionately at the hands of this pandemic? So I am with you every step of the way. And a public option is a step in the right direction, but I'm not going to stop until everyone in this country has the care that they need and deserve.
I hope everybody heard what the Congresswoman-elect said. She's a working class woman. She was involved in a serious accident, and you decided not to take the ambulance because of the cost. We have heard instances of people who are really sick who refused to go to an emergency room because they couldn't pay the bill. 500,000 Americans go bankrupt because of medically related bills. Can you imagine the insanity? You get sick, you're in the hospital, you got to worry about getting well. And then on top of that, you got to worry about whether your family goes bankrupt. How crazy is that? How cruel is that? So, the Congresswoman and I are on the same page. We're going to fight for that. I think Biden has some good ideas to get us started. But in my view, we're going to have to go a lot further than that.
All right, let's go to another question. This is something I know, Senator, that has been on your mind, and I'm also, having conversations with the New Georgia Project. I know y'all are working on this too, but this comes from Matt in Hartwell asking, what can we do in rural Georgia to flip our counties in the runoffs and for elections to come? I don't know if, YT or Claire, one of you might want to kick off an answer to that one. How do we flip these rural areas in Georgia, and how do we keep winning in those areas?
YT, Claire, jump in.
So I'll jump right on in. Being from Sandersville, Georgia, I know that you have to meet people where they are. And I know that you also have to talk to them in a way that is understandable based off where you are in this state. And so essentially we start having the conversations now and building the bench and making sure that people turn out. We knock on their doors, we're sending those text messages, we're calling them on the phone, and we engage with them and not tell them what we want, but ask them what they want and why they're so engaged in this election and the next election and the next election and the next election. And we don't leave them behind, even though most of us, or I preferably, lived in the metro Atlanta area.
YT, do you find that a lot of folks feel that nobody is listening to their issues?
I find that is not the first thing that's asked all the time, is what is their issue or how they feel about it, but more so advising them of what they want them to know. And it needs to be more transformative. We should use the information that we're gaining from people and use that when we're talking to other people in those areas as well, and get them to be part of the conversation so we can take them from being a voter to being elected and to being more stronger advocates throughout the whole state of Georgia.
Good. Claire, did you want to jump in on that?
Yes, thank you. I want to second what YT just said. We definitely encourage people to send out texts, make those phone calls. We are out there canvassing in all the rural areas and all 159 counties of Georgia, knocking on doors. If it's something that someone is concerned about, we make sure we ask them, are you concerned about any economic justice issues, healthcare issues? We make it about the voter and not so much about us.
Good. Anybody else want to jump in on that one?
So, Senator Sanders, one of the things that I found is for too many of the conversations, people have been saying that, well, voters turned out to vote because they wanted to get rid of Donald Trump. Now, don't get me wrong. I definitely wanted to get rid of Donald Trump in this election, but this election was not about Donald Trump. It was not about just one election cycle. It was about the people in this state using their voice and their power to choose the direction that they want us to move forward in. And so when people say, how are we going to get people to turn back out to vote? It's because they didn't turn out to vote just because of Donald Trump in the first place. It's about the voters. It's about the people in this state. And so we've been building on this cycle after cycle after cycle. This didn't happen overnight. I was thrilled to cast an electoral college vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on Monday, but it wasn't just about that. It's about the decades of deep organizing on the ground and the work that we're going to continue to do in this state, regardless of who's at the top of the ticket, because it's about the voters, not about the people on the ballot.
Very well said. All right, Misty, got another question?
Sure. Well, I think this is kind of on the same subject, and we've been getting some messages like this. So I'm going to throw this one to you, Congresswoman-elect Williams. This comes from Twitter, a person named Stacy saying, this is my Congress member. I also happen to know her as an acquaintance and consider her a friend. I would sincerely like to know and hear from her just what to expect as Democrats in the state, as the state has let me down and has broken my heart, and frankly, I have no faith. What exactly will be done? What will Democrats do? And I'll just pause really quick. We're getting a lot of questions about people being like, I'm kind of disappointed in Democrats. I don't really know if I want to come out and vote. So, to you, Congresswoman-elect, but maybe even Chase or others, it's like, we've all been disappointed once and from time to time from our elected officials. So what do you say to folks who might be questioning the Democratic Party or other Democrats right now?
I get it, y'all. Hey, Stacy. I don't know which Stacy you are. I got a lot of friends named Stacy, but hey, Stacy, I understand your frustrations. I've been there. more often than not, as the leader of the Democratic Party, I get frustrated. So trust me, I understand, but it's about accountability. It's about holding people accountable. And when we look at who's running in these races for the United States Senate, y'all, there could not be more clear of a contrast. We have two people who literally looked out for themselves, enriched themselves when they got inside information as leaders in this country about this pandemic. They started trading stocks to make sure that they were okay and their bank accounts grew, instead of looking out for you, looking out for everyday people in this country who needed a heads up on what was yet to come. Maybe I would have stocked up on some toilet paper. Maybe I would have got things together so that I could make sure that Carter was okay in his virtual learning. But y'all, they didn't give us an opportunity as everyday people in this country. They looked out for themselves. So there could not be a more clear contrast in who we have to vote for on January 5th. So I'm showing up and I'm bringing Stacey. You said you're my friend. You know me, homie. You got to come with me. We got to bring people with us because we need to get Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock elected to the United States Senate. And then guess what? They're not above being held accountable either, because we're still going to go to them about the issues that we care about and make sure that they are truly representing the people of the state.
Anybody else want to comment on people's disappointment with the Democratic Party?
Yeah, if I may, Senator, just very briefly, give the Democrats in Georgia the opportunity to prove ourselves. The Reverend Warnock is a preacher in his day job, and Jon Ossoff, his day job is fighting corruption. Give us a chance. Our incumbents have showed us exactly what they care about. They care about their bank accounts. Give these new candidates a chance, and we'll change the world.
Thank you. Let me just say this. If you look at politics from an historical perspective, one thing you learn is that real change never takes place from the top on down. It's not that the leaders make the change, it's that people force the leaders to move in the right direction. Millions of people stood up for civil rights, and then LBJ had to sign a civil rights bill. Workers stood up for workers' rights. Women stood up for women's rights. The gay community stood up for gay rights. We are in a moment when we are seeing at the grassroots level, all across this country, young people saying, you know what? I don't want to have a lower standard of living than my parents. I want my own house. I don't want to be burdened with outrageous student debt. I want to be able to drink clean water and breathe clean air. I want a decent paying job. I think healthcare is a human right. I believe in immigration reform and treating people with dignity no matter where they were born. And when millions of people begin to stand up and fight for those principles, for economic justice, that we don't have 500,000 people homeless tonight, that we don't have people working for starvation wages, when people stand up for social justice and an end to bigotry in all of its ugly forms in this country, when people stand up for climate justice. And let me tell you, if we don't get a handle on that issue all over this country and all over this world, we're going to see future generations living on a planet increasingly unhealthy and uninhabitable. But when people stand up, they tell the leaders where to go. Believe me, that is the way it works. So I would say to Stacey, who asked the question, Stacey, we got to organize at the grassroots level. We've got to start electing great candidates like Nekima. She is going to go to Washington and make a difference. She has the guts to take on powerful special interests. And we need a few hundred more Nekimas going into the Congress, and certainly a heck of a lot more going into the United States Senate. And when that happens, man, you're going to see some real changes. For the last 4 years, many of us have been playing on defense. I know Georgia, big into football. Well, all we've been doing is defending ourselves against the guy who's in the White House and all this crazy stuff. It's time for us to get on the offense, to start moving the ball forward. And that's what we've got to do. And with your help in Georgia, that is what we will do. Misty?
Okay, let's see. We have another question that I wanted to ask coming from someone, Donna from Facebook. Donna says, what about the fact that they're trying to preclude people who are in unemployment, someone like me, from receiving the direct payment? How am I supposed to continue living on unemployment without receiving a survival check? It's disgusting. To the people who would need it most. Yeah, so Donna's asking, what about people like her who are already on unemployment and really struggling and can't get a job right now?
Donna, if I look tired tonight, it's because I've been dealing just with that issue. A week or two ago, we didn't even have, it's a long story. I don't want to bore you and take you, it's a long story, but the bill that is now being debated simply does not have enough money to do what has to be done. We should be spending about $2 trillion in the midst of this terrible pandemic and economic breakdown, and yet this bill is only $900 billion. That's a big mistake. What I have fought for in the last week or two is to make sure that Americans get a direct payment. That means each person gets a check similar to what we did in March through the CARES Act. In March, that check was $1,200 for adults, $500 for kids. That's what I want. And obviously, people who are getting unemployment would also get that check. Now, I think, Donna, at the end of the day, we're in a struggle right now. I don't think the Republicans will be successful in denying you and people on unemployment from getting that check. You're hurting. You need that help. We're fighting as hard as we can to make sure that at least, I'm not here to say that $600 per person is going to do the trick. It's not. It should be at least double that. But we are fighting hard to make sure that at least millions and millions of people get some help in the midst of this terrible economic moment.
That's right, Senator. And that's going to conclude our time for questions tonight. I just want to remind folks who are watching, for those of you in Georgia, early voting has begun, so you can start voting right now in your county where you are registered to vote. The last day for early voting in person is Thursday, December 31st. And early voting sites will be closed on Christmas. And also, any registered voter is eligible for a no excuse absentee ballot. I was just listening on to NPR how large in part how many absentee ballots helped us to win in Georgia. So I hope people are taking advantage of that. And then as a reminder, the election is on Tuesday, January 5th, and polls will be open until from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. So with that, I want to turn it back to you, Congresswoman-elect Williams, for any last thoughts to share with the audience, and then we'll have Senator Sanders close us out.
Y'all, I just want to thank you for tuning in tonight, because I know that Georgia is on everybody's mind, and we are going to bring this home on January 5th, but we cannot do it without you. It's going to take all of us texting one more voter, making one more phone call, knocking on one more door safely to get this done. We can deliver not one, but 2 U.S. senators right here from the state of Georgia so that we can make sure that we can move our country forward in the right direction. We got to send Senator Sanders some help to the Senate, y'all. So let's get it done. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman. Let me just say this on behalf of the people of the state of Vermont, Georgia, thank you very much. And I think I speak for 48 other states as well. There's an enormous responsibility on the shoulders of the people of Georgia. There is. And you guys are doing phenomenally well. I cannot believe what kind of grassroots organizing you're doing. And Nakima and Stacy and all of the people out there have done such a great job. And we got another, 3 weeks left to go, huh? And this is it. If this whole country, you're going to have a footnote in American history. The history books are going to say, thank you, Georgia, for helping to turn this country around. So I want to thank all of our panelists. What a great panel of wonderful people who are doing great work. And Congresswoman, I look forward to working with you in the coming years. And Georgia, let's do it. Give us 2 good United States senators. Thank you all very much. Good night.